Game one is officially in the books, and Toronto, obviously, as you know, comes away with a victory. A couple of things really quick here before I get into this. Number one, I would call it a great win, but I wouldn't call it a great performance. And I'm going to tell you why that's going to make sense here in a little bit by the Toronto Raptors. The other thing that I would go with this is, before I really get into it, is, I've been reserved in terms of this whole Drake thing that's been going on. Because it really hasn't bothered me for the most part what he's been doing on the sideline. But getting in Draymond's face, I think after the game was a little over the top and should probably calm down a little bit. I know Drake's a megastar. He's hype, and I'm one of the few that believes that he is sincerely a part of that organization and what he does, given all the research and everything that, we at the Full Court Press have put up about him. But in terms of getting after Draymond like that, probably want to mellow out a little bit there, man. Anywho, let's get into it. So, first of all, Kawhi Leonard played good, but he didn't play great. And this is one of the things that I talked about going into the NBA Finals. When I look at this series and I look at Kawhi Leonard and I look at the last series that Kawhi Leonard was in, I saw very hit and miss. I saw very poor, for the most part, field goal percentage-wise shooting from Kawhi Leonard. One of the things, though, that I did see in the last series that's carried over to this series is his ability to get to the line and create points that way. Shot very well from the free throw line. I think only missed one free throw out of the game, was 11 out of 12. By last note that I have wrote down here for Kawhi. Look, the first quarter of that game, and particularly for both teams, was exceptionally sloppy basketball. The Golden State Warriors were leaving guys wide open for the Toronto Raptors, who were having a very difficult time hitting wide open threes early on in that game. Matter of fact, their first 10 out of 15 shots in that game were three-point attempts, and they didn't hit but I think 3 or 4 of those. The other thing that I look at is the lack of rotation from Golden State. I mean, literally, there were moments when guys were just standing around, and the best example I can give is Marc Gasol taking a three-point shot from the top. Literally put his foot in. Am I going to go in? No. Put my foot in. I'm going to go in. No. Step back. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and take the three. Where's the defense? I mean, seriously. I mean, guys were literally just standing around and watching things happen. That's not going to win you a game in the NBA, let alone an NBA final series. So in that aspect, in that regard, that's something where they're definitely going to have to improve on is rotation and not allowing guys to just take open jumpers. Now, they did better as the game continued, but in that first quarter, that was horrendous play. And again, it was horrendous play by both teams because from what we were looking at, sloppy, both teams missing wide open shots, a lot of turnovers, particularly by the Golden State Warriors, who were double digits in turnovers in this basketball game. Not really diving after loose balls the way that Toronto was in terms of that. Toronto, I think, outplayed and out-hustled Golden State through the majority of the basketball game. And then the other thing from Golden State that I saw that I really didn't like was on the offensive end, I just didn't see the aggressive nature. I was watching this game, and I really thought that the bench for Golden State played maybe better than the All-Stars with the Warriors. Draymond Green had 5 fouls, even though he comes up with a triple-double. He plays pretty good, who I thought would be an X factor in this series. One of the more underrated and underappreciated players in the NBA, given the team that he's on. So it makes sense in a way that he doesn't get talked about a lot. But he got into foul trouble early, 3 fouls before the end of the first half, which along those lines, in the first half, I think it was 5:55 remaining in the second quarter, if I remember correctly, and already the Golden State Warriors were in massive foul trouble. And the Raptors were in the bonus. So if I'm Toronto, I would have been going right after them. That was one of the things that in-game adjustment in the third quarter they did. Look, a big part of the performance from Pascal Siakam, who's going to be talked about a lot tomorrow when it comes to this, was understanding that Draymond's not going to play Draymond Green basketball in the third quarter because he's going to have to watch himself He's already got 3 fouls, and they went right after him. They attacked him and Cousins both, and they went right after them inside the paint, which I thought was a huge reason why Toronto came away with this victory. Then you look at the role players. You had Fred VanVleet played phenomenal basketball. He was really good on defense. He was very good about getting inside the paint. He made a hell of a shot down the stretch there where he was up against it all, came away with a three-point play. And then, of course, early on, he played very well, hitting threes. You had Marc Gasol, played phenomenal, 14 points in the first half, ends up with 20 in the game. So they adjusted on Marc Gasol, but Marc Gasol's defensive presence was definitely duly noted. And one of the things I talked about in my post after my synopsis of what I thought should happen was, maybe they should run some traps, and they did. And Marc Gasol was a huge part of running those traps. Matter of fact, there was even one occasion where Gasol got in the face of Steph Curry and put his hand up and ended up getting a jump ball, which Curry didn't even try to get. He was like, the hell with this. I'm not even going to try and contest with Marc Gasol. But the point is, defensively, the Raptors ended up taking control of that basketball game, and that was how they were able to come away with a victory. Then, of course, we have to talk about Pascal because he played such good basketball all the way around. Offensively, defensively, I think he finished with 8 boards, 2 blocks, if I remember correctly. He was running the floor. Come on, man, that play that Pascal had where he passed it on the fly, got the pass deep, then he threw it behind his back, and then Kawhi comes in with the finish. Pascal played NBA All-Star level basketball in this game, which is something that we didn't see from Kawhi, something that we didn't see from Steph, something that we really didn't see from Klay Thompson, something that we didn't see from any of the star players in this basketball game. It was really from both ends, all the role players and all the guys around him that were doing well. I mean, you take a look at Kyle Lowry, for instance, 5 fouls, they ended up having to take him out. But I think the part where he performed the best was assists. I think he had 9 or 10, if I remember correctly, in that game. But poor shooting, wasn't able to capitalize on, again, some wide open opportunities, particularly early in that basketball game. When I look at this game, for me, the bottom line is the in-game adjustments were phenomenal. I thought the strategy with the rotation, something that I talked about, that the Toronto Raptors really needed to figure out. They were phenomenal in that regard. And I thought Nick Nurse, you see a lot of times where teams call timeouts, right, because they're afraid of somebody making a run. So somebody goes on like an 8-0 run, hey, we're going to call a timeout and try and stop this thing. Somebody goes on like a 12-1 run, we're going to call a timeout and try and stop this thing. There were times when Nick Nurse called a timeout when his team was up by 8-9 points, not really having their back up against the wall in any regard. And he was continuously strategizing, I felt, one step ahead of Steve Kerr, who I thought was just not ready for the overall game plan from the Toronto Raptors, who made very good in-game adjustments, meanwhile stuck to their original game plan, which is, again, what I thought was play very good defense, and that is how your team will stay in it, and that is how they will win the game. And ultimately, that was the deciding factor, aside from Pascal's overall amazing performance, that of Marc Gasol as well. Guys, I am Drew Duncan, host of the Full Court Press. Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram is all at Drew Duncan 83. Don't forget, when you share this post, use the hashtag Don't You Dare Touch That Dial. And, of course, the Full Court Press is on Facebook and Instagram as well. And don't forget to find me on YouTube, simply Drew Duncan. And as always, don't you dare touch that dial.